Welcome, everybody, to the Strength Connection podcast. David Amerland, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for coming.
Michael, I'm thrilled to be here. I can't wait to see where this conversation is going to go.
Same. I've been really excited diving into your book, Built to Last. This topic of longevity, how it
Mm.
relates to fitness and health, it's one of those things I can't get enough of, and love hearing the different insights of how people approach it and really dive in because I think it's so important from there. So the book that you put together, again, it's called Built to Last.
Mm.
There's so much good information in it, but there's also such good practical application of people come in, and I think that's where I always love books and insights with that because so much we talk about theory and ideas, but then how do you actually break it down and put it together? And I think you've done a really great job with that.
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
It was to be honest, I never thought I'd write a book like this.
Uh-huh.
So it's the way it came together was kind of weird, and it led to that practical approach which you just spoke about.
Okay, let's dive right into that. So, you're a chemical engineer and also an SEO expert, which then went into writing a book on longevity. How does that happen for it? Like, was this an idea that popped into your head? Like, how did you go down this timeline of the work that you were doing in engineering to now going into work with health and fitness and longevity?
Okay, this is book number 19 for me,
Okay.
and I've done, as you said, books on different subjects: search marketing, branding, online digital marketing, decision making, trust in the digital domain, intentionality, and now this, right? And superficially, they're all very different. But what drives me always and how the way I approach each subject is us. It's a human element, human behavior. I'm fascinated by the way we behave in certain contexts. I'm fascinated by the fact that we don't do what we should do and we do things we shouldn't do. And then we justify both decisions.
Hmm.
And even though we're really smart always and very logical, we really are not. And the reasons which we are not is what fascinates me. That's what drives me every time I write a book. I try to answer a particular problem, and all of those books are different. I focus more on the fundamentals and less on the details, which will change with time. Fads, diets, marketing trends, the way we do business, all the superficiality will change because our capabilities change. But what has remained fundamentally the same for the last 10,000 years is us,
Hmm.
the operating system that drives us. And that's what I always try to get at, and then try and get practical insights which we can apply today to become a little bit better in that environment, in whatever context we actually apply it.
Yeah. That's interesting. It's such an easy thing that we're always looking for. What do we need to add into our life when it's really, well, what do we need to really remove? Like, why aren't we doing the things that we know? It's really that difference between knowledge and wisdom, right? It's like we live in an we live in an information age where there's more information out than we could ever possibly consume. But it's kind of there's a famine of wisdom, which wisdom comes from
Mm,
action and comes from application from there. So
mm,
from book one to now book 19 of going in
mm.
with writing, has your process changed of how you approach writing? Obviously, the substance is, different from work you've done with, at the SEO and then even mindset work I know you did in there into fitness. How has the process of you approaching writing changed? Has it changed a lot, or has it been pretty consistent since you started?
No, it has changed. It's evolved. Certainly, the earlier books I wrote took a lot less time. They're more theoretical based. Uh, the in for me was mathematics. To
Mhm.
answer your question about from chemical engineering to SEO, it's maths. You follow the maths, you follow the patterns, you see what search engines are doing, understand the data sets, and then you make predictions based on that. And that's how I was able to write about semantic search a year before it came out. So that was a lot easier for me. These books, well, in the last three books, I've actually taken 2.5 to 3 years to write from beginning to end. There's a lot of research that goes there. There's a
Mhm.
lot of complexities when it comes to human behavior, and now we have more data than ever, which gives us a handle on the theories that drive us. But at the same time, those complexities then have to be, from my perspective, to be internalized. I have to understand them well enough, and then I
Mhm.
have to find the fundamentals, and then I have to articulate them in a simple way, which is never easy. So yeah, the process itself has become harder
Mhm.
because the concepts are more they're more complicated.
Yeah. How did it start for you with Built to Last? Did it start with with a question of like, why do we know all this stuff and we're not doing it as far as longevity or fitness? Or how did that start for you?
Well, this book has a funny origin story, and it started back with a pandemic.
Okay.
For me, training is fundamental to my life. It's part of my identity. I've been training in martial arts since I was 13. I have three different black belts in three different styles. I'm a certified Taekwondo instructor. I competed nationally and internationally for 10 years at a very high level. So I never really thought I'd do something on fitness because every time somebody asks me, what should I do?
Hmm.
The answer was, how should I know? Because I don't know how you feel inside yourself. What works
Mm.
for me isn't going to work for you. But with a pandemic, I put together a home gym because we couldn't go out for 2 years outside our houses,
Hmm.
and I started training at home. And I have a friend who also has a home gym, and we get together once a week and we train together. And if you ever train with another person, what happens is during the connection, the conversation, the intensity goes up because you don't pay
Sure.
so much attention to what you're doing. And it's a social thing as well. We talk. And he would come and say, I saw this article in, Men's Health, or, I read about this online, and would look at the latest methods making the rounds, the latest trend, and would analyze it. And then I would bring in studies to look at it from different
Mm.
perspectives. So there's a strong social element to our training. And from those conversations over a period of 2 years, the book was born.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Were you writing notes at that time, or was it just kind of always in the back of your mind, like, this might
Well,
be something I want to explore a little bit more in a written
what
dialogue?
happened, we were discussing things, and he's a policeman, so he has contacts with, other policemen and a lot of the public. So we sort of were discussing things, and I was beginning to become fascinated by the fact that so much about fitness was a mystery to so many people,
Hmm.
and I didn't know why. And for me, fitness has always been something which I do persistently. So I had a bit of a blind spot on why other people can't,
Mm.
which I had to overcome. And through his perspective, I began to see something different. And that intrigued me. So then I went digging, why is fitness so difficult? Why
Yeah.
don't we do the things we're supposed to? We all agree we should do them
Yeah.
100%. And then we don't do them. And it's not lack of access. We have more access to information, as you said, than ever before. Hundreds of thousands of books on fitness with a very prescriptive approach. Diets. We spend globally $1 trillion a year on fitness equipment, courses, clothes, the works. Gyms are everywhere. We can train at home. And yet, by 2050, half of us globally are going to be either overweight or obese.
Yeah.
In developed countries, only 35% of the people train 3 times a week, which is abysmal. It's nowhere near enough, which means that 65% of the people either train less than that or not at all. So there has to be a reason. It's not that we don't, we're smart people. We know what
Hmm.
we should do.
Yeah.
So that was my starting point. I thought, we need to see why this happens.
It's a really interesting point, David, of how we can get kind of jaded into our own viewpoint and think that everybody thinks like us, not realizing
Mm,
that there's a huge population out that doesn't understand this or is lost in some sort of translation if we've been doing it for so long. There was a story I remember. Yeah, I worked with Strong First, the company, for a long time, and every time I would go to an event, it was 2 or 3 days where you're just around all very like-minded people. Everybody takes care of their health and they're focused on it. And the conversations were very similar, like with your friend, like everything's about technique. And it's just a fun time. And I always remember I would be at the airport, like going home after 3 days and start looking around at everybody. And I was like, oh my God, like they don't look like this group. Like this is like they're a completely different mindset of what
yeah,
I was
yeah.
just in for this immersive 3 days. And I think
It's a
it's an
different
important
language, right? Yeah.
exactly, and I think it's an important thing to remember, specifically as coaches, because I think I spend all my time with either clients who are engaged in the process of evolving and getting better, or I'm on a podcast speaking with people like you who are in this. So I can even get into a mindset thinking that everybody is having these conversations and thinking like this, not realizing there's a huge population of people that are not engaged in these conversations or don't know how to articulate this information. And it's so easy to kind of get in your own bubble at all times, not
Mm,
realizing
mm,
that not everybody thinks like you. We need to articulate this in a way that everybody can understand.
absolutely. I think in fitness in particular, because it comes with such a heavy subtext of implied judgment that
Mm,
if you start making assumptions, immediately you are, without meaning to, you are ascribing labels to people who can't live up to the standards, whatever those standards are. And I think it's such a we make, I mean, it's not a complicated subject. It can be very simple, but we make it complicated because our behavior is designed to take in all this information, interpret it, which allows room for misinterpretation, see subtext and patterns where there are none, understand kind of implied judgment where there may not be. And then, it becomes really, really complicated in our head. And I'm hoping through these discussions we have, your podcast included, we can actually begin to dispel some of those things and show that it can be rewarding, it can be made easy to do. And the whole thing which we have had from the external world, with the sort of artificial sort of standards of fitness,
mhm.
which we all have to sort of attain, it's none of that.
Yeah. Let's dive into that a little bit, David. With misconceptions, I think this is always interesting. Like when in
Mm.
the research that you did to develop this book over a few years, what were some of the major misconceptions that you were seeing how people viewed fitness or, health span, lifespan, that type of
Yeah.
work? What were like the longest levers that you found that we were missing the mark and people were misinterpreting the information that they need to ingest?
Okay, the easiest one and the one to tackle first is the fact that people believe they either have to go all in or none at all. So they either have to, do 1 or 2 hours every day for, whatever, or even 3 times a week, but 1 or 2 hours. If you say, well, you can do 5 minutes, and they think, what can 5 minutes do? And they immediately deprecate that in their heads, and that's it. They won't do it. And they'll never find an hour or never find 2 hours because life is complicated. And you may force yourself to find it for a while, but other things get in the way. You fall off the wagon, so to speak. And then it's really difficult to get back on because now you feel you failed yourself, you failed your task, your resolve has gone, your motivation is not what it should be. And then we add also things like willpower and discipline, which
Mhm.
really literally are words that don't have a meaning beyond the semantic one that we apply. And I'll talk
Right.
about that. So, so that's one. Second thing is we're really easy to accept artificial standards of fitness through films and posters and the professional fitness industry sometimes, the ads we see. So culturally, we have all these things programming us to look slim, to look strong, to have a six pack. And if we fail to have that, then we think, oh, it's not working for me.
Right.
And then we also think that it's going to be easy to get to that point. We think, see courses like get a summer body in 2 weeks.
Exactly.
you know, six packs. Or the favorite one, from zero to splits in like 8 easy lessons.
Yeah. That's
and
the craziest one is the mobility one. So it's like, oh, you're going to be flexible like a Russian gymnast within 6 weeks. Just do these exercises.
yes,
Like, get
yeah.
the F out of here. Yeah.
Oh no, it's like week one, you can't touch your toes, and by week six, you're doing the splits, and you're thinking, no, it's not gonna happen.
Just by
So,
sheer will, you're gonna get it's like, yeah,
I
yeah, no, that's there's a biology and a physiology that's going on here.
mean, it's basically things about six pack, right? We understand having abs which are visible,
Hmm.
and even if we do everything right to attain the look, whether it's a 4 pack or a 6 pack or an 8 pack, that's DNA, that's genetics.
Yeah.
Arnold Schwarzenegger only has a 4 pack. He's only ever had a 4 pack
Yeah.
because genetically that's all he has. So a lot of people don't understand that. They think, oh, I'm not working out hard enough, or why don't I have a 6 pack, for instance, right? So we get lost into these tiny visual details which we receive culturally, and
Uh-huh.
then that affects so much of our internal thinking. It allows us, first of all, to be really harsh on ourselves. Then reflexively, we're harsh on everybody else. And they're being harsh on us back. So we
Right.
get into this loop where we are constantly failing ourselves. And that is not a very encouraging position or situation to be in.
Yeah, and I mean, when you get into a phase like that where you're either confused or overwhelmed, right? It's like people
Mm.
say it's fight or flight. More often than not, it's freeze. It's like I'm not doing anything. Everything's too
Yeah, yeah.
overwhelmed. It's interesting what you said about genetics. I remember my
Mm.
former boss that I worked with who was in the industry since the 70s. So kind of peak bodybuilder aesthetic type time. That was like the main thing of health and fitness. And he had a lot of pro guys that were in the gym and he was training and he said, what would I need to do to get on stage? And the guys went up and is like, you'll never be on stage because his hip bones were just wider, just like his hip bones.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
you could get as lean as possible, you're never going to have that aesthetic in your body and get
Pinch
that.
waist. Yeah,
Exactly,
yeah,
it's like,
yeah,
so get incredibly shaped, but it's just not going to translate to you going on stage. It has
yeah.
nothing, there's nothing wrong with you, it's just how you were built. And he's like, oh, okay. It's like, so yeah, I mean, part of this is, genetics, but it
Mm,
is something, David, that, it's so easy for us to be in this comparison culture of getting in,
mm,
not
mm,
realizing that the average person, if you lose 10, 15 pounds, if you're overweight or like just get a little bit stronger and get consistent, the difference of how you'll feel internally for
mm,
yourself might be night and is going to be night and day. Even though
mm.
you don't look
Absolutely.
like that guy yet, you are going to feel so much different, but we don't see that right off the bat.
Yeah, and I think this is what we need to focus on. We talk about, I discussed willpower and discipline. And really what we need to talk about is motivation.
Mhm.
And motivation has a hard neuroscientific definition. It's essentially a soup of chemicals in our brain, primarily driven by dopamine, which allow us to go from a place where we don't feel so good about something to a place where we feel better about it. And that's motivation. And you apply that to whatever context you want: career, jobs, reaching for food, grabbing a drink, whatever. You get thirsty enough, you're motivated to get a drink. Okay, you reach a threshold in your head. And then we talk about training and fitness. And you said what you said, which I loved, is the way we feel. And that's what the connection we really need to make. We need to make a connection of how we feel now and actually understand it, own it, aim for something better in the way we feel.
Mhm.
And if we can do that, then our motivation changes because we reframed what we're going to do. And we're more likely to do it because the calculus in our head, which works out the value of the stressor of exercise, recalibrates with the outcome that has now emotional meaning for us, which means that the process is not as arduous for us perceptually. We'll still do the same things.
Mhm.
So that's our motivation. And if we talk about willpower, which means the ability to do things, and discipline, the ability to do things repetitively,
Mhm.
so they're consistent. Well, willpower is a process which you need to work out. And a lot of people try to tackle exercise without a process in place. And discipline is a structure around it, which makes a process repeatable day after day. So
Mhm.
willpower is process and discipline is structure, which means all you need is planning once your motivation is in place. So suddenly the whole concept of how do I get fit, how do I train every day, how do I maintain my discipline, how do I make sure I have sufficient willpower, comes down to this. Understand why you're feeling the way you do, understand how you want to exercise to change the way you feel, and now work out the process, the steps which you need to undergo or to undertake in order to
Mhm.
get there, and now create a structure which makes it possible for you in the complexity of your life and the unexpected events which are bound to happen at some point to continue doing what you want to do because it's important to you. And if you
Mhm.
work that out, there's your motivation, there's your willpower, there's your discipline, and suddenly the outcome is you feel better. And if you start feeling better, you change inside, then you change on the outside, then everything changes because your perceptions change and your horizons change and your goals change just on those seemingly simple steps.
Yeah. That's really beautiful, dear. I've never heard it really interpreted or articulated that way, and the difference between motivation, willpower, and discipline. It's these words that we throw out all the time, right? As you said, the semantics behind it, and then you identify as whether you have it or you don't. And kind of the breakdown that you said right there is like, yeah, like, discipline is more about the plan that you put in place, not like whether you have discipline or not. It's, are you putting together this plan that I love you said that in your book of, and I've said this before, is your fitness program should it should fold around your life, not your life fold around your plan. And that's where kind of going into the all or nothing type thing. And I've heard that from a million people I've worked with over the years is
Mm.
I'm an all or nothing person. I'm like, well, what does that mean? Like when you go to your car, do you run there as fast as you can? It's like, no, it's like you walk there because you know it's a sustainable thing. But it's just some of these things that we just kind of, throw out and say all the time.
They're excuses. I mean, we are when we fail, and we fail because we're not sufficiently motivated. And when we're not sufficiently motivated, all it means is we haven't really worked out why we're doing something.
Mhm.
If we have worked it out and it has meaning for us, then we understand why we're doing it, and then we are inclined to do it. But when we're doing it because we have this vague idea, this is what we should do, then we allow other things to take priority because they're more important, seemingly. So now we have to find an excuse of why we're not doing what the thing which we said we should do, but we're not
Mhm.
doing it anymore. And you can't say, well, I reprioritized it because it's not important enough for me emotionally. Because sometimes we don't have that kind of self-awareness. Sometimes we don't have the kind of self-honesty. Sometimes we can't be honest with others about these things, and that's fine. So we have to come up with something. So we're very good at producing these logical excuses. I'm an all or nothing guy. My life is really complicated. I don't have all the resources that you have. We focus on all the things which are obstacles, and we say, well, here they are. Here are all the obstacles. And we forget that if you're sufficiently emotionally motivated, what do? You find a way around every single obstacle or over it. You either overcome it or you bypass it.
Mhm.
So, but that means that you're motivated. So it's always down to motivation. And it's always down to emotionality. How
Yeah.
important is it for you? Our brain is really good at prioritizing things. We know from studies, for instance, that if you work out in front of a mirror, you do the exercises, you actually observe your body moving in the mirror, you watch the muscle groups move, and you get excited by that. And somebody else does exactly the same reps, exactly the same workout, exactly the same technique, no mirror. So they're doing it blind. And you get between 3 and 5% better outcomes in terms of hypertrophy and muscle tone than they do.
Do you really?
Simply because, yeah, absolutely, it's crazy. Yeah,
That's
the
so
studies on
that's
it.
so interesting. I've trained so long without a mirror of kind of focusing more on like feeling the body and stuff
Yeah,
like
but see, you're actually imagining yourself in that.
that.
I do
Mhm.
the same with martial arts. When I train on my own, I have two options. Sometimes I'm really tired, so I just go through a
Sure.
routine and I do it by numbers, and I'll do so many kicks, so many punches, so many of this technique, and I kind of do it blindly because I have to train, and I know the science, right? And sure enough, physiologically, it helps me remain at a certain level that I want to be. But I know that if I pour in a little bit more energy into it and actually visualize the sparring situation, and visualize the opponent, and visualize
Right.
my body doing these strategic decisions in 3D space because I'm visualizing the actual fact, the next day I feel way better, feel more alive, more physically competent. My brain it feels better because the connections have been strengthened.
Right.
And I know that it's just that sometimes I just fall into a trap of I don't want to put in the extra effort of visualizing things. So,
Sure.
but so what you're doing is that exactly, you're visualizing it, so you don't need a mirror. But if you don't have the energy to visualize, well, a mirror is going to excite you because you see your muscles moving and you see them getting pumped. You're thinking, oh, this is the look, and suddenly, you can visualize yourself further down the line with bigger muscles, same movement. And what your body does, because you're emotionally connected to the movement, is it reallocates resources because it thinks this is really important. And to put this in context, because you think, okay, is this just a little mind game you're playing? Well, essentially, yes.
Mhm.
But this is the context of this mind game. If we go back 10,000 years ago, the brain receives a signal from the body that we live in an environment that's really adversarial. I have to climb, I have to jump, I have to run fast because this is a dangerous area. I need these adaptations to survive. And those signals come with the emotional attachment of survival. The brain prioritizes now energy to create these adaptations in the body to help you survive. You're going to get springy muscles for jumping, really strong tendons in your fingers to help you climb, and you're going to have really, really fast sprinting because you need it to survive.
Mhm.
So that's where that emotional connection reprioritizes resources in the brain, which reallocates what adaptations should happen first in the body.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah. And I think it's like operationalizing mindset, right? It's
Yes.
like, as you
Yeah.
said, it's like, yeah, if you there's good days when you can visualize it, you're in a good state, but no matter who you are, there's going to be days when you're not at your A game where, yeah, maybe a mirror and visualizing, like using an external source right there to help you kind of
Yeah,
borrow visualization from something else. That's a
yeah,
huge key as well. And I think that's one of the misconceptions that I love to try and break apart is, we're often always trying to find what is the best way or the optimal way versus, well, what's the best way for today? Like, what do you need to do today?
yes,
Maybe it's going to be a little bit different, the other day. And that's where I think it's this dance between structure and, this order and chaos. Like, yeah, some
yeah,
days you just need to let it flow and feel it and getting in. Other days you need to borrow it from other areas because that's what consistency is. It's just getting
yeah,
it. Sometimes you just need to check the box off and just get it done in the best way possible.
absolutely. I always say, in doing, we become.
Yeah.
It's not the other way around. So you just got to do things.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter how you do them, right? You just got to do them.
There's something in your book that you had that I wanted to ask about the difference
Mm,
between sustainable and sustaining something.
yes.
That was interesting. Can you explain that a little bit more about what is the
Yeah, absolutely.
differentiation?
And let's look at it in the context of exercise, which is a stressor.
Hmm.
Now, um, a lot of high level performers are, I trained for 10 years, I was competing at a high level. In that 10-year period, and I had a high power job, I was putting in between 20 and 22 hours a week, 52 weeks a year. In my off season, the intensity varied, but the time was spent was the same. And I can't recall a single day that I woke up in the morning and there wasn't part of me that was aching. And I thought that was okay. Now that's crazy. Was I fit? Absolutely. I was really, really fit. Was I healthy? No, I was not. I was underfed, underfueled for sure. Not sufficiently recovered. There's probably inflammation in all parts of my body. And, it was a struggle sometimes to actually get through a really tough training session when it shouldn't be, because I was pushing on every front.
Mm.
Okay, was that good for me? No, I can tell you it wasn't. Okay, although it got me to a really high level of fitness, it's not the kind of thing that's sustaining for us long term. You can do it for a while for very specific reasons, and I did it for very specific reasons for me, which is why I did it for so long. But when we talk about exercise, which is a stressor, it has to be tackled in a way that actually makes us feel good, to go back to what you said earlier, which is, absolutely brilliant starting block. So we start from there on how we feel. If it doesn't make us feel good, if we have to power through it and grit our teeth every time, that is not the kind of thing that's good for us mentally or psychologically. So that's not sustaining. And because it's not sustaining, it's not even sustainable. I mean, I probably had I know for a fact that I had a very long training, competing career for that kind of sport. I retired in the year 2000. I was 35 at the time. I was competing against 18-year-olds. And the fact that I could still win was good for me because I was putting in so much time. But the reason I stopped is because I thought, okay, I have this really high power job, it's absorbing all my energy, and I'm going to have to double the amount of time now that I'm training. And I couldn't see it as being feasible. I thought, this is crazy. So I had to make a decision. And I regrettably, because you miss the excitement, you miss the adrenaline of competing.
Yeah.
But I knew I had to make a break. I had to make a decision. It was logical. So I applied a lot of thinking and I moved away from that, from the
Okay.
competition.
Yeah. As you said, it's like there's seasons of times to go into that high intensity. Maybe it's a competition or something short term from there, but it's not sustainable. And as you said, with something sustainable is it should make you feel good. By
Yes.
that, what do you mean by feel good? Is that something that you're feeling more like right away, like you should be feeling more energized after your workout, or is it more like kind of post day? How would you categorize if someone would say, "Well, do I feel good or not afterwards?" Like, how would you interpret that?
That's such an easy question to ask, and it's so difficult to answer. there's so, there's so many layers to that. Okay, so let's try and unpack it a little bit.
Mhm.
By feeling good, when do we feel good? We feel good when we sense internally that we have control over our body. This is important to us because if we feel we have control over our body, then the anxiety we feel because we have zero control of the outside world, is more sustainable at a lower baseline levels, which means that internal inflammation due to stress is going to be lower. The energetic cost of our everyday living is going to be lower, and we'll have more energy to deal with things.
Mm.
So that's our feeling good. We feel in control. He said we feel more energized, and sometimes we feel more energized after exercise, where we have expended energy, which is
Right.
paradoxical, right? It's crazy. You think, how is that possible? Well, this is what happens. We expend energy because we go through a stressor. All the processes of our body get elevated, cortisol, adrenaline, heart rate, body temperature, blood pressure, and then they have to drop to a baseline level. And because they drop to a baseline level, a metabolic state also begins to become a little bit slower in order to recover. And we have more margin now to deal with the excitation that comes from the stimulus of the outside world. So we
Mm.
feel more energized, more capable, even though if we measure energy expenditure, we should be depleted. We
Right.
shouldn't have more energy, but we feel we do because we have that margin. And to give another analogy, it's like the revs in your car. If your car goes up to 10,000 revs and then it goes on red, and my car goes on 5,000 revs, you have 5,000 revs more on your odometer
Hmm.
than me. So you can push it harder. You can race somebody without straining your car. And I'm like redlining it.
Right. Yeah.
So
That's
that's
Yeah, that's a beautiful analogy. Yeah, my company Strong First actually just wrote something that I loved of like, amateurs are the only ones that value 100% all the time. Like the professional knows the difference between an average Tuesday in the gym and the Olympic, lifting mat from there. It's
yes.
like you have to treat it like a working man sometimes. And I always found like on a practical application with specifically like strength training exercises, I always looked at rep speed. Like if I was doing
Mm.
about that same speed through reps as each one, okay, I knew I was in that threshold. Once you kind of start seeing that power production start to reduce, that's another indicator of like, okay, maybe I'm going into the red a little bit too quick from there.
Mm.
There's times to do that, obviously, yes, but for sustainability, as we're talking about here, you need to kind of find that threshold.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thrilled by what you said. You created your own metric to
Yeah,
basically hold you back so you don't pour yourself in, fail at some point, get disappointed,
yeah.
fail the next day because now you're tired and your central nervous system hasn't recovered, your muscles haven't recovered. So, in order to have that sustaining training routine, you need to be able to control your output in every
Mhm.
time. And professionals do exactly that. They will go hard one day, maybe, and then have 2, 3 days when they're building specific skill sets. Perhaps they're refining some movement, perhaps they're working on a different body part, perhaps they're doing something else, which will help them in their overall capability, but it doesn't immediately look like the training,
Mhm.
for strength or anything like this.
Yeah.
So it's important to have those things. And it comes from that awareness, which you said, you can't be racing every day. That's crazy. Nobody does that.
Yeah.
Part of your race preparation is stretching, jumps, explosive power, breathing exercises for lung capacity. So you basically build up your race capability if you're racing, or your lifting capability if you're lifting, your sparring capability if you're competing in a competitive combat sport, by doing all these different things, which then you bring together on the day, you synthesize them in your head, and that's your entire package.
Yeah. So in your research with Built to Last and on the context of longevity, like the three big things talk about like strength, and then there's mobility, and then there's
Mm.
cardiovascular training. Obviously, there's a little
Yes.
overlap with some of those, but
Mm.
as you were researching this and putting this together and kind of putting it through yourself, did any of those jump out more as more important, or like we need to prioritize a little bit more emphasis on one versus the other? Did any of those kind of light bulbs pop up in your mind as you were doing research in regards to
Yeah.
what people maybe are missing or not putting as much emphasis on that they need to address
Yes.
more?
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the paradox of humanity, the operating system we run. There are four pillars to our health span and our lifespan, and they are strength, the mobility, the cardiovascular fitness, and the last one is sociability. And this is not being a party animal. This is actually making meaningful social connections. We know that there are 5 blue zones across the world. There are geographic areas where people live to a long life, but it's not just a long life, it's also a long and healthy life.
Hmm.
And they've been studied extensively. They've been studied for physical activity. And yes, we tick that box. They're physically active, whether they're exercising or just, doing their garden, they're moving their body every day. We looked at their diets. The diets are, those areas are not socioeconomically rich, so they don't have massively rich diets. So they have a good balance between various foodstuffs, which are seasonal. They have meat and they have vegetables, so not like they're all vegan or they're all meat eaters or anything like that. We looked at their cardiovascular fitness and their recovery, and they're very good at basically working on that. They walk long distances, they get plenty of good quality sleep, but they do that to all different degrees. So there was no one element that actually could be highlighted as the connective thread across these zones, except one, which is the same in all of them. And this is being social. They're all part of a community. They have a strong community feeling. And this is what this does. They still have stressful lives. They still have problems. They still have to deal with complexities, which are part of the modern world. But by belonging, they feel they're not alone. And inside their head, this basically does something amazing. It reduces stress and anxiety to very, very low levels. So chronic inflammation begins to become reduced. The body basically reverts to a younger body because they have less inflammation than the rest of us. And all the other things now become possible. If you have less inflammation, you have more energy. You're going to be physically more active.
Hmm.
If you have good social connections, you're going to feel happier. So you're going to do things. You're going to watch your diet because, you're not going to do something which you're not going to drink to excess or eat to excess because,
Right.
nobody else does it around you. You are going to make sure you get plenty of rest because your friends get plenty of rest. It's part of your lifestyle. So that one element, that sociability, the ability to have meaningful social connections, suddenly allows them to thrive at a both physical, mental, and psychological level, which is marvelous.
Isn't that crazy? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's it's such an important point. I personally, for me, I train a lot by myself. It's one of those modalities, but I started a while ago going to a friend's gym on like a Sunday, doing like just like a kettlebell club where we just go. It's an opportunity for me to kind of shut my brain off, not think about what program, just follow it. But there's a bunch of other people in there, and I know it is very contextual that I do things that I normally wouldn't do. I take less breaks. Like I follow the plan because I'm not going to be the weak link in there. Like I'm going to
Yeah,
be around and I want to be part of the crew. Then we're pushing it forward together. And so training wise is good too. But yeah, just the aspect of, being social with people specifically for men, I see. I think women naturally are a lot more socially connected. They kind of keep those things going. But specifically in the personal growth space that you see,
mm,
there's such this message of like this Sigma male, like go at it alone. You don't need anybody else to do it. Yes, like it's on you to do your work, but that doesn't mean that you need to do this alone. And I think that's one of the wrinkles that has kind of gotten lost in the personal growth space that some people are like, oh, like I don't need anybody, nobody cares, for me. It's like, yeah, no, you need some people around you. Like that is
yes,
going to help you more than you're willing to admit.
absolutely. I mean, what you said is resonates so deeply. We have this myth of the strong, silent male. And I don't know where this came from, but it did. And it sticks because energetically, to have that image in our head is easy. It doesn't cost us anything, it doesn't require anything, it asks us to do nothing.
Mhm.
And that's exactly what we do, nothing. We don't socialize, we don't talk, we keep our emotions hidden, we don't share. And what does that do? It makes us feel isolated, it makes us feel weak, it makes us feel disconnected, it makes us feel misunderstood, it makes us feel alone. And then all these feelings internally are expressed in elevated cortisol levels, which affect the energetic pathways in our body. We can't even access the fat resources that we have when we want to. So, just on that, the moment cortisol rises, and then cortisol getting past a certain threshold drops testosterone. We can't build muscle, we can't get stronger despite the workouts. We have elevated stress levels in our brain, which sees stress after a certain level as a threat. And it shuts down the higher analytical parts of it. So we can't think straight. We look at the facts in front of us and they perplex us.
Mhm.
So we can't navigate reality in our life and the complexity of it because we feel so stressed out. We feel that nobody can understand our situation, and being alone makes us feel weak, and feel weak makes us apply a victim mentality to our reality, which leads to depression with all the internal toxicity that that implies. So there's a cascade of negative health outcomes that come from that single, relatively simple myth, which you just said is being propagated, which it is.
Yeah.
And we need to break that. We need to say, historically, people have banded together because we understand that there's strength in numbers. Like Caesar said, stronger together. Caesar the monkey, not the emperor.
Exactly. Yeah,
So,
the good
yeah,
Caesar. Yes.
the good
Oh,
Caesar, he
I
said,
love that. Yeah.
stronger together.
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly right. And the moment we're able to connect and share, what do we feel inside us? If we go out with friends and it's a small group of friends, there's not a lot of implied judgment, there's not a lot of, gamesmanship to, whether somebody gets a reason, up status or down status or whatever. So these are stupid games we play. So there's none of that. So let's say we have open discussion, it feels good. And afterwards we feel elevated, we feel relieved, we feel that something has lifted off us. Why? Because our brains have come alive, they have recalibrated to the reality, and a brain that doesn't connect with other people doesn't recalibrate, so our mental health suffers.
Hmm.
Our internal health is a reflective of our mental health, so our stress levels and anxiety levels drop, and suddenly we operate better on the basis of that relatively simple and true and honest and open social connection. We
Yeah.
should do more of that. Historically, we've come from that. Like historically, we came from an active lifestyle because that was our everyday life. We had no choice. We substitute exercise today because we don't have that lifestyle anymore. And our bodies weaken and they get sick, and our brains weaken and they get sick because we don't move them. They're designed to move.
Yeah.
So, all it is we need to understand the simplicities that drove us, that maintained us healthy by helping us survive, and then replicate them today in a smart way. We're all smart. We need to find ways to make it happen.
Yeah.
I'm I've lived in Greece for on and off for the last 10 years now. And I'm fascinated by Thermopolis, like everybody else, because, what's 300?
That's
But
it. Yep. That
it's
movie put
amazing,
it,
right?
yeah, it put a
Yeah,
stamp on our culture. Yeah.
exactly. But I've looked at the research they were doing, and those guys are sent out to fight the Persian army. They're in their 60s, like Leonidas, their king, was like 60, 63. So he wasn't going to go and fight in the veterans division, right? He was going to fight against 18-year-old conscripts
Yeah.
who wanted to kill him. So if you're able to function at that level at 63, and admittedly they had a regime that lasted a lifetime, and the ones that survived, they're handpicked. So it was a little bit Darwinian. At the same time, it shows that it's possible. I say the brain and the body have two simple commands each, one single command each. The brain is to predict the next moment. That's what it is. It's a predictive machine. And the body is an adaptive machine. It's there to adapt to the environment. And they do that to help us survive in unison, right? So in order for us to help the body adapt, we need to send a consistent signal that we live in an environment where it needs to be strong, healthy, fit, stable, and we need to create that environment because it doesn't exist.
Yeah. That's so fascinating. It reminded me of it's kind of going back to again like that knowledge versus wisdom. Like you can
Mm,
learn all these different things from the information, but oftentimes wisdom really comes from the social connections that you have.
yes.
And I
Yeah.
remember I heard, the Josh Waitzkin, the former chess
Yes.
match
Yeah.
champion
Yeah.
searching for Bobby Fischer. I listened to him on a podcast and he told this fascinating story about like where we are with AI and all that information. And, chess is one of the first, things that AI kind of took over. It said like these things just know it because it's a math game. Like it just
Mm,
knows everything that you're going to do.
yeah.
And he told this story about him and another grandmaster. There was one move that they were trying to figure out, and it took them like 3 months to break it down and to like figure out how to, get through this one particular spot. And he said, where now you can put that into an AI system and it solves it in 3 seconds. It's like, so you're saying,
Yeah.
oh, well,
No.
it solved that problem. What he said, though, is that during that 3 months of trying to figure out that problem, they were connecting, they were figuring out other
Mm,
things that they were going to, and they kind of had like a
mm,
shared, connection of mastery behind it, which led them to asking the next question and then the next question and then the next question. So it wasn't just that they solved this in 3 months. they were getting so much else inside of that 3 months by connecting together and working on it. And he said that's where the difference between all the AI stuff that's going out, yeah, it's going to be able to solve things really quick, but the wisdom often comes from breaking it down and figuring it out and working with it.
Yeah.
And that is, yeah, we can get there faster, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be foundationally built into our system. I thought that was such a fascinating kind of analogy of what we were talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's spot on what he said and what he said. It basically highlights an ancient proverb, which I find fascinating. And Herodotus said that 2,500 years ago. He said, "No man crosses the same river twice because he's not the same man and it's not the same river." There's fluidity in both parts. The river will change, the flow, the colors, the spring, the temperature of the water. The person will be changed by that process. And we know now for a fact that if we listen to a podcast and think about it, if we read a book, and the book does matter, fiction, non-fiction, our brain basically rewires itself. 6 months down the line, we may not remember the podcast, we may not remember the book, we may not remember the lessons we learned from the non-fiction book. But what will change is the brain's capability to deal differently with a situation it faces now.
Mhm.
That's magic. We're the only living organism on the planet that we know of capable of rewiring its capabilities in that way. No other animal can do it. So that social connection is important. And we know that if two people get together and they have a kind of shared understanding of reality, two things happen. First of all, the conversation, even as we do this now, is tapping into a database. I tap into a database of what's inside your head, your knowledge, your experience, your wisdom, your perception, your viewpoint, and I learn from you as you learn from me. We are exchanging information, data. But the other thing is that the brain synchronizes. That's why the conversation makes sense.
Mhm.
And when they synchronize, you feel smarter, you feel more capable, you feel able to do more with less. You don't have anxiety. And that synchronization is magic. It's like the brain suddenly becomes optimal.
Mhm. I
And
love it.
you can't do it alone.
So, David, one of the demographics that I often talk about and I like to highlight is so much, particularly with fitness and with health, is lean towards like the beginners, the people that are
Mm,
just getting started. And we talk about them a lot. But there's this whole demographic of people that maybe have seen success down the line. Maybe they've been doing it for a little bit, but now they're kind of lost in what the next process. And
mm.
I call it the advanced beginner stage, which is where a lot of people kind of fall off or struggle to maintain consistent from there. What are some of the like struggles that you see with people who are on the path and on the journey of being consistent? Maybe they've got some goals down and they're in a good space, but now they're getting a little bit complacent, maybe are a little bit susceptible to going back to old habits and old patterns.
Yeah, because they get fitter, they think, oh, it's going to last. That's the first mistake. And the body's adaptive, adapts to the environment. So if you go back to the environment you had before you actually started training, and the signals of which are required for the body's adaptation are lost, well, the body quickly reverts to that because it doesn't need expensive muscles anymore. It doesn't need to have extra capillaries for oxygenation of those muscles. So your energetic load is going to be easier, and it does that to help you survive because it thinks you changed the environment. If you lived in the mountains of Scandinavia and you had to climb to get anywhere at all, you had to battle the elements, and then you had to battle each other because of poor resources, your brain received signals which turned you into a Norse warrior, and you looked like a fierce beast out of everybody's, nightmare, and you were just a farmer because you lived in that environment.
Right.
You take that person now and you put him in the steppes where, he rides a horse and everything is flat. Well, his musculature is going to change. His physical makeup is going to change because he doesn't need those muscles anymore. So he's going to become a Mongolian in physique because they have different energetic needs. So that's what happens. This is where I say the environment we create for ourselves, and we have to be very smart about this. We have to be knowledgeable on the effect it'll have, is essentially the person we are aiming to become. So if we live in a chaotic environment where there's no structure, where anything can happen, where we don't plan anything, where every situation is a crisis because we haven't seen it coming, well, we are always constantly firefighting. We're always constantly on edge. We have zero capacity to absorb anything, so we're emotionally overreacting. We're constantly exhausted. It's impossible to get fit. We don't have the space. If we manage to get fit now, what happens? Energetically, we make better use of the energy we have. Because our baseline internal um, biomarkers are lower, we have lower blood pressure, lower heart rate, lower cortisol levels, less anxiety. Now we have margin to deal with the outside world. That's where the extra energy comes from. Now we can deal with that, and now we can train consistently. And we need to be constantly self-aware. There's no given here. If we say, okay, I did this for 6 months, I've got this, and I got fitter. Now what? Figure it out. If you say, now what, and look around and there's no answer, you're going to revert back to what you had because there's no one to guide you. And I say in Build to Last, no one's coming to save us. When it comes to fitness, the world we have created today is uncaring about us as individuals as it can possibly be. It doesn't really care. What it sees us is as productive units that work, pay taxes, do something productive until we die.
Hmm.
And the moment we die, somebody else will replace us. It doesn't want us to, it doesn't care whether we get old and sick. So for that, we have to be responsible ourselves. We have to be the makers of the future us. We have to do that
Hmm.
consciously. So we have to make that connection. And here, if we're not willing to do it, unfortunately, nobody will do it for us. So we have to be able to say, okay, now what? And this is where the smart bit comes. If we can't figure it out, we can still access help. We can ask a personal trainer. We can ask a psychologist. We can go to a therapist. Whatever it is, the help is actually there. There are people who can help us. We don't have to necessarily do it alone,
Hmm.
but we have to instigate that action. We have to take the initiative. We have to say, what's the next step? I want to go further. I want to be better. I want to get to 60, 70, 80 and still enjoy life. I still want to be able to walk wherever I want to, lift my grandchildren, kick a
Hmm.
ball, and wake up in the morning, get out of bed without groaning because I'm not in constant pain.
Yeah, I love that. David, this has been an absolute blast. I love the way your mind works. I love really the way that you articulate and really you approach this work. Not just from a fitness standpoint, but really from a mental standpoint as well in this. I think this is so powerful of what you're doing. So I appreciate you coming on today.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this. Absolutely fantastic. Thank you for all the questions.
Absolutely. What's the next book? You got 19 out. I'm sure there's 20 that's going to be on the market. You thinking of anything new?
I'm toying around with ideas. What happens after each book? I need a little bit of a mental break to see what's going to catch my attention. And I try not to repeat myself every time because, first of all, that's the easiest thing to do. But secondly, it doesn't actually excite me, and it doesn't matter how well the writing goes. If the excitement isn't there, the
Right.
reader actually can sense that you're not excited.
No doubt.
So I'm sort of exploring ideas. It'll come together soon enough.
Beautiful. Awesome. If people want to check out more of what you're doing, check out your book, Built to Last. What's the best place that we can direct them?
Right. You can find me at davidamerland.com. I put a lot of stuff out there. I come across studies. I get really excited about them. I glean insights. I share them openly because I think that's how we all become better. If you Google me, you'll find all my socials. You'll find Build to Last in local bookshops or Amazon. And if you use bookshop.co.uk or bookshop.org, you can order it online and pick it up in your local bookshop, and then you're helping your local community, which is great.
Oh, beautiful. Awesome. David, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. I got so much from this conversation from you. So till next
Thank you
time.
for the
Okay.
opportunity. Thank you.
Absolutely. Listeners, thank you so much. Catch you on the next one. Peace.